From Wikipedia on fascism, Roderick Stackelberg places fascism, including Nazism, which he says is a radical variant of fascism, on the political right by explaining the more a person deems absolute equality among all people to be a desirable condition, the further left he or she will be on the ideological spectrum. The more a person considers inequality to be unavoidable or even desirable, the further to the right he or she will be. I'd never heard of this definition of left and right, but I like it. Oddly, right libertarianism sells itself with the ideology of the left, but uses tactics of the right, ignoring history or data on how poverty occurs and why government intervention is needed, unless we were to end corporations entirely, like we had for the first 100 years of our nation. Fascism is an interesting creature. While in America, conservative is viewed as right, liberal as center-left, and communism as extreme-left. Fascism is defined as being against all three of these things: anti-conservative, anti-liberal, and anti-communist. It's against conservatism as it wants to smash the long-term norms and values and any hierarchies that may exist. Anti-liberal as it is against freedom, democracy, rule of law, and the ideals of peace. Anti-communism because it doesn't view everyone as equal. The strong will make things better, so the strongest shall change the world for all. It is a cross-class system where everyone is essentially a prisoner, and while it may appear to be a meritocracy, it's only a meritocracy for one skill: people who can backstab each other best and get away with it. For many people who are good at this, this sounds exciting or like heaven. Violence is not a vice, but a virtue to them. Survival of the fittest and social Darwinism will weed out the people viewed as weak, whom science shows just have a different set of talents and viewpoints that actually encourages innovation and new ways of thinking, while a hostile strength-based system ultimately kills creativity and innovation in the long run. Nazi Germany did well in innovation in the war effort because of the vast amounts pumped into science and engineering prior to the war, which made it one of the scientific centers of the world. But the model was far from sustainable in the long run, and we took some of their best scientists as they fled the Holocaust. There is no one type of fascism. Every single one has its own traits based on the area and region. What they have in common is a perceived history of nationalistic downfall from greatness, perceived vice that caused it, and a promise of return to glory. Some of that vice is ethnicity, some is culture, some is behaviors or lifestyles. For Germany, it was the lack of eugenics and the evil Jews. For others, it was just communists. When they run out of one group to actively scapegoat, they will find another one to get the public to hate. They have no problem breaking the law, but then incredulously hold the other side to standards they refuse to hold to. Lies, deceit, and trickery are a sign of strength to them. Trolling and false equivalency were all part of the brown shirt tactics in the essay, as Sartre noted. A collection of loosely tied together groups that played as useful idiots for Hitler that didn't exactly engage in politics but more hooliganism, and messing everything else up around them, like modern trolls. They targeted disaffected youths, especially young men full of hormones, and told them that their masculinity is being stripped by the establishment. Why Trump, the alt-right, incels, alpha male cult members, and anti-feminist MRAs are often referred to collectively as fascists. Just like the brown shirts, even though they may not believe in fascism, they are useful idiots helping to spread fascist propaganda. A form of vaccine called a mosaic vaccine exists, where you use multiple antibodies similar to certain elements of the virus, and then the body reacts as if it has seen and is inoculated against that virus before. This is what the alt-right does. Each member spreads pieces of Nazism while having their foot in the rational camp, to the point that collectively fascism seems like a legitimate form of thinking. Hitler disbanded and arrested much of the SA after coming to power as their usefulness declined and their disorganization became a liability. The only thing his man-baby internet skeptics supporters give a shit about, but promoted him for. Things Hillary would not have done. Russia is helping to amplify all of these, and any pseudoscience idea to provide more noise and confusion. It is helping act as the American SA, as it makes up about a third of the trolls online. If Russia itself is not a form of fascism, certainly uses fascistic tactics of whitewashing and idealizing the past, treating everyone else in the world as attacking their poor nation as a scapegoat, while they scapegoat anyone who disagrees or dares speak up as outside agitators or paid for by foreign interests. Fascism, while extreme right, has no moral standing while pretending it does. It's about strength for a few, fear for many, and the use of youth anger and outrage as a tool for making everything awful, and preying on older people's fears and golden age syndrome of how good things used to be. Until fascism looks like the only viable option. Mussolini's position changed daily. You couldn't pin him down on anything. The media also viewed him and Hitler with amusement. At first as people who could never win, and then reported as a sideshow attraction, as funny tin pot leaders. All at the same time, these leaders suppressed and attacked and vilified the free press. And then, oops, we screwed up big time. Sound familiar? Fascism also falsely helps push infighting among their political enemies through lying and infiltration, so they are the only ones left standing. It will suppress free speech as much as possible and break the rules any way it can, even when screaming they are having their free speech suppressed, and accusing their enemies of breaking the rules. Government laws mean nothing to them, and they will rules lawyer wherever they can and sneakily break it when they can't. Hitler was elected as chancellor because the communists were being violent in Bavaria, while the Nazi Party were exacerbating it further. He was able to stoke enough fear of communist and anarchist violence and downplay the violence of his own people to get elected. He only had 1/3 of the votes in the Reichstag, but was able to get another third intimidated for the lives of their families by the SA to vote to allow imprisonment of anyone in government with socialist or communist leanings, real or imagined, after a firebombing of parliament claimed to be caused by a communist, though the real circumstances are murky as the Weimar Constitution allowed him martial law powers after such an incident. Without 1/3 in prison or hiding, he now had 50% of the vote, and was able to threaten enough of the others to change the Constitution, giving him more powers. We all learned about what Hitler did after he came to power, but never what he did before he got to power, or how he came to power. We all understand the Holocaust, but we were never taught how and where these hateful ideologies arose. They will use their attacks to recruit more people. Their members love martyrdom and persecution and suffering, or perceived suffering, which creates closeness and resolve. Violence against them just makes them feel more righteous. Using their own tactics against them of creating infighting among themselves can work. Groups like Life After Hate have found useful de-radicalizing methods and tactics, but that requires them to find and target what caused them to join up in the first place, so it's never a one-size-fits-all. That chaos is why they are so hard to break up and de-radicalize. Until we learn and remember how fascism works, we're going to have to repeat history over and over. Hopefully, we have caught it soon enough that we can staunch the bleeding worldwide and begin to reverse the trends, but there's no guarantee as more and more governments continue to fall to various intensities of this fascist-style government. From Turkey to Egypt, from the Eastern Bloc nations of Europe to the United States itself, trolling is one of the cornerstones of fascism. True debate can never happen, it's survival of the dickischist. Freedom and democracy have been stabbed and poisoned, and is on life support at the moment. Until we can fix this, nothing else matters, because there's no moving forward if they die. There will be no conversation if free speech dies, and with the Sinclair Group forcing their own local news TV to call other legitimate news fake news, Trump now pretty much owns the trusted news, like Al-Sisi, Putin, Berlusconi, Erdogan, and any other dictatorship. Trump will continue to push where he can until he finds a weak point that the law was vague on, then troll the courts with it just like his thousands of other lawsuits pending against him, using the court to bully and intimidate. Fairness is for pussies, equality is for snowflakes, standards are for other people, and empathy is weakness. The only advantage is that he is not as bright and knows very little about the actual law, or his brazen lack of respect to the Constitution, and his enabling by the GOP would damage democracy as we know it, so instead he and his staff are just massive kleptocrats who are trying their damnedest to be fascists. And if the 2018 elections don't punish them, or at worst are hacked, Trump will most likely go from kleptocrat phase to full-on fascist phase with very little if anything to stop him. And genuine hacking of the election is not out of the question, and if it is allowed to stand and enabled by the GOP, we must have a nationwide strike to correct it. We must understand how fascism works. It is not just an authoritarian dictator. The dictator would have no power if the public mindset had not been cultivated, spread, and the mind of the people been hacked and rigged. Thanks to gerrymandering and failures to add more members to the House of Representatives since 1941, the Dems in most states have to win by a landslide to break even. Removing his congressional protection is the only way to stop him. Otherwise, the real fascism will begin. Nazis always vote. Vote.